want to switch gears. And frankly, I just kind of want to do a follow-up on a story that we've been covering and talking about quite a bit. And that is the status, the present and future, if you will, of Michigan State football. So obviously, by now, you don't need me to tell you everything that happened. But what, about 3 weeks or so ago, Mel Tucker, the then head coach of Michigan State, was put on leave, was basically suspended without pay after a report came out that he was accused of sexual harassment by a woman named Brenda Tracy, hired by the school to speak to his team. By now, you know all the details. You don't need me to tell you who, what, when, where, why. But about a week ago, it was made clear that Mel Tucker, the school, planned to fire him for cause. Mel Tucker spoke out. He defended himself. He said it was a completely consensual relationship. And on Wednesday morning, Michigan State did officially fire Mel Tucker for cause. Now, a couple things here. One, will he basically, by the way, I should reference, when you say fired for cause, what that means is they do not plan on paying him any of his existing contract. I'll let the lawyers figure that one out. But with Mel Tucker now officially out at Michigan State, I do think it's officially time to really ramp up the conversation of who could potentially be next. We did an initial list of candidates when he was first suspended, but he is now officially fired. And I would add this. Over the last couple of days, I really spent a little bit of time kind of calling around, talking to people, this, that, the other thing. And I do think there are a couple of updates that I think are worth discussing here now that Mel Tucker has officially been fired by Michigan State. The first thing, and I think this is the most important part before we even talk about names, the first thing that I think we should talk about, what kind of money is Michigan State going to spend? As Mel Tucker, obviously we know he got that massive contract after that 11-win season in 2021. I know it's easy to criticize Michigan State for giving it to him at the time, but remember, it was an 11-win season. LSU was flirting with him, or at least he was flirting with LSU enough to make Michigan State worried. And it is worth noting, like, the program was trending like a rocket ship in the right direction. Back-to-back wins over Michigan State in that 2021 season. They beat Penn State. So everything was really trending up for Michigan State. I bring it up because when it was clear Mel Tucker wasn't going to be the head coach for very much longer, the first thing that I thought was, well, if Michigan State is willing to pay $9.5, $10 million for a coach the way that they were willing to pay Mel Tucker, that really does kind of change the dynamics of who could be interested and who might not be. And so I want to start there because I made a few phone calls over the last week, knowing that Mel Tucker was ultimately, he was going to be fired, whether it's with cause, whether it's without cause, whether they litigate it in court, whatever. And I will say that probably over the last week or so, I've gotten a lot of good intel back, a lot of good feedback back. And the one thing that I have learned, I think when Mel Tucker was initially put on leave, I think everybody at Michigan State, they rallied the troops and we're going to do what we need to do to stay in the top part of this league. But I think as time has gone on, there is, I guess, growing, kind of in-house bickering amongst everybody involved, the administration, the boosters, whatever. And I don't know if Michigan State is going to push all their chips in the middle and give that $8, $9, $10 million a year contract to the next guy. It's for a few reasons. I think one, they kind of realize how lucky they may have gotten with this Mel Tucker contract. Now, again, we'll see what happens. We'll see that we'll let it all play out in court. But I think they're all looking at each other like, if this guy hadn't screwed up publicly and we were able to fire him for cause, we would have owed a coach that turned out to be not very good an awful lot of money. So there's the concern about, do we want to tie ourselves 8, 9, 10 years, $100 million to the next guy? But then there's other kind of sea change things going on in the athletic department as well. One, you may still have to pay Mel Tucker. And so do you want to commit $100+ million to the next guy, knowing that Mel Tucker might win something in court and you could owe him $25, $30, $40 million, whatever. And I also think the economics around the athletic department have changed as well. Now, obviously the good news is you're in the Big Ten, you're going to get that fat TV check starting next year. At the same time, a lot of other people have reported this, and I was able to kind of independently confirm Matt Ishbia, the guy who really was the guy, one of the 2 or 3 guys that really spearheaded the Mel Tucker contract, his finances are a little bit different than when that contract was put into place and when the extension was signed about 2 years ago. For those of you who are not diehard sports fans, Matt Ishbia is not only a Michigan State booster who spends millions upon millions of dollars on the athletic department, he is also the new owner of the Phoenix Suns. Obviously got that about a year or so ago, traded for Kevin Durant. Well, now he's got a little, $2.5, $3 billion invested into that organization. And so because of it, he doesn't have just a lot of money lying around. He's got more money lying around than me, you, and everybody we know combined. But I don't know that he's willing to, again, front the money that it's going to take to get the A++ coach. And so because of it, I'm just telling you right now, you can agree, you can disagree, you can get mad at me if you're a Michigan State fan. I think those A++ candidates that you could potentially get, I think it's going to be hard to get them if you're not willing to pay $8, $9, $10 million a year. I think it's going to be especially hard to get those guys in the new Big Ten, where Michigan State, as good of a program as it's been, it's going to be that much harder to compete with Oregon, USC, Washington, and UCLA now coming into the league. Now, to be fair, it goes without saying, you all know, Michigan State, when it's right, can still compete with just about anybody in the Big Ten. And I'm not going to sit here and rank jobs and which job is better. But the job is unquestionably tougher than it was 2-3 years ago when Mel Tucker took it. And so because of it, if you're not willing to pay crazy money, I don't know that you get those A++ candidates. So a couple of names that I would just go ahead and cross off the list right now. If you want to get mad at me, Michigan State fans, feel free to do so. One, I have seen a little bit of internet chatter, mostly in the YouTube comments, about Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer's not coming out of retirement for Michigan State. Sorry, not happening. Not in this era, not in the Big Ten, not with this. It's not happening. I see a lot of Michigan State fans saying it. Sorry, I don't buy it. Deion Sanders, we talked about last time. He's not going anywhere, at least not this year. Remember, all those players followed him from Jackson State to Colorado to play for him. They can't transfer again. So even if you were to offer Deion Sanders some crazy amount of money, and remember, he makes about $6 million a year at Colorado. He's going to get a big raise with all the money that he's created for that athletic department. I don't see the scenario in which Deion Sanders is leaving, because Travis Hunter couldn't transfer. If Shedeur decided to return, he could not transfer. So Deion Sanders is not happening. Beyond that, one name that I've seen quite a bit, Mark Stoops, head coach, Kentucky. You understand Mark Stoops makes like $8 million a year at Kentucky. That sounds absurd, but that is what Mark Stoops is making. His name has been linked to other jobs. And given what he's done at Kentucky, I think, 2 10-win seasons in about the last 4 or 5 years, he is deserving of that money. So Mark Stoops makes $8 million a year. He ain't coming to Michigan State for $8 million or $9 million or $7 million or 7.5. He's another guy you could just cross off the list. Now, in terms of candidates that I do think are realistic, let's get into a few. One guy we've talked about a lot, Mike Elko, Duke. I believe by the end of the year, he is going to be the hottest name in coaching circles. Has Duke football in the top 20. How about this? They're hosting College Game Day this week as Duke hosts Notre Dame in a top 20 matchup. Problem with Mike Elko, I think the good is he only makes about $3.5 million. Obviously, Duke is going to try to keep him and give him a raise. And obviously, if Michigan State were to double it $6-7 million a year, which is kind of the going rate for a Big Ten coach, I think it'd be hard for Mike Elko not to listen. Problem with Mike Elko, as we've discussed a lot on this show, the concern becomes, are there going to be better opportunities for that guy? Remember, this is a guy that came from Texas A&M. If Texas A&M flounders starting this weekend against Arkansas, and you do have to get rid of Jimbo Fisher, you'd think Mike Elko would be the number one candidate there. Because he's got ties all over the country, he's going to be a candidate everywhere as long as Duke keeps winning. And so because of it, I think he's probably the number one call. I also think he might play a little hard to get and see what else is out there. You know, a guy that I've seen quite a bit, his name pop up, and I think it kind of makes sense. I could see PJ Fleck being interested in this job. Now, PJ Fleck made $6 million a year at Minnesota right now, and he's got a $7 million buyout. First of all, that buyout not going to stop anybody from taking him from Minnesota if they want him. But I could see PJ Fleck being interested in leaving, because even though, as I said, Michigan State's still going to be a very tough job in the new Big Ten, Minnesota is going to be that much of a tougher job in the new Big Ten as well. I mean, we're talking about Minnesota. Like, you start looking at jobs in that league and where Minnesota is going to be when Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA come, that is going to be a very, very hard place to win consistently. And the guy has had 3 9-win seasons and an 11-win season at Minnesota. Kind of feels like he's kind of hit a ceiling there, right? So does he go somewhere else? Does he get a fresh start? I will say there are positives and negatives with PJ Fleck. He's certainly his own character, but also the one thing I don't think you really have to worry is outside of the facility concerns. Obviously, coming off the Mel Tucker stuff, that's going to be a concern with whoever you hire. And I don't think it's going to be an issue with PJ Fleck. He's mostly about football and family. So I think that's a positive. And I think, listen, if he can win 9 games at Minnesota, I do think he can build Michigan State into something even bigger and a team that can compete for college football playoff berths in that 12-team playoff era. Really quickly, a couple other names. One, listen, I said it. Michigan State fans don't want to hear it. I mean, Pat Narduzzi is going to do whatever he can to get that job. Was the longtime Michigan State defensive coordinator, obviously at Pitt now. And as I've said a few times, Mark D'Antonio is now back in that building as a consultant with that team. Don't know how much sway Mark D'Antonio's name is going to have if Michigan State keeps playing the way that they have. But Pat Narduzzi is going to try to get that job. A little bit of a hearken to the glory days. Again, a little bit of a different vibe than Mel Tucker. I'll leave it there, but some of the stuff that Mel Tucker's accused of, I don't think you have to worry about that with Pat Narduzzi. But with Pat Narduzzi, there's a lot of negatives as well. Is he going to be serious about NIL? Is he going to be serious about the portal? He's been outspoken about a lot of things. Those are all things to consider. Also think if you are going cheap, it might be the coordinator type route. Sean Lewis, who of course is the coordinator currently at Colorado, I think he's going to be a really hot name, and I would be very interested if I was him and if I was Michigan State. Smart offensive mind, had a great experience as Kent State's head coach. He just left because it's really hard to be a group of 5 head coach right now. You recruit, you develop, you're going to lose players to the portal and to NIL to other schools. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's a candidate if Colorado keeps winning. Now, the counter is Colorado puts up a few more eggs like they did against Oregon last week. It's going to be tough to justify bringing that guy in. And I think some of the other coordinator names make sense. Brian Hartline from Ohio State, great A++ recruiter. Obviously having, risen up the ranks, was the wide receivers coach. Now is kind of whatever that co-offensive coordinator role at Ohio State. And obviously you would weaken Ohio State in that scenario. Jim Leonard, I do think is a name that they are interested in. Former Wisconsin player, former Wisconsin defensive coordinator, former Wisconsin interim head coach. They actually played pretty well under him last year, but when Luke Fickell becomes available, it is hard to say no to him. So those are some of the names that will be considered at Michigan State, but I'm here to tell you, man, if Michigan State is not committed to paying big money for a coach, it's going to be hard to get that A++ candidate that you're hoping to get.